Hi class. So today it's time for us to learn about the Pythagorean theorem, okay? This is a special theorem. Theorem just means like a rule that applies, okay? This is a special theorem for only right triangles, okay? So if we're looking at a right triangle, the longest side is the side that is opposite the right angle, and that has a special name called the hypotenuse, okay? The other two sides that form the right angle are called the legs, okay? So it's important that you know that on a right triangle, the hypotenuse is always the longest side, okay? Now, the Pythagorean theorem says that if we take a right triangle and we draw squares off of each side, okay, so look what I've done here. This right triangle, the legs measure 3 inches and 4 inches, and the hypotenuse measures 5 inches. So off of the hypotenuse, I've drawn a 5-inch square. That means it's 5 inches on every side, okay? Off of this leg, I've drawn a 4-inch square. It's 4 inches on every side. And off of this, I've drawn one that's 3 inches on every side, okay? Now, I've not used an actual ruler. I've just given it dimensions, okay? So the square that I draw off the hypotenuse has an area of 25 inches square, right? Because it's 5 inches on each side. This square, has an area of 16 inches square, and this has an area of 9 inches square, okay? Now the neat thing about right triangles is the square that I draw off of the hypotenuse, the area of it is going to be equal to the sum of the areas of the squares drawn off the other sides, okay? So let's think about this. My area of the square drawn off the hypotenuse is 25 inches square. The area of this one's 9 inches, 16 inches. If I add 16 and 9, I get 25 inches square, okay? Which is equal to the square that I've drawn off the hypotenuse, okay? So this is the neat thing about right triangles and the neat thing about the Pythagorean theorem. The area of the square drawn on the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the areas of the squares drawn on the legs, okay? Way back, a famous Greek mathematician guy came up with this theorem, okay? He had all these different right triangles and he noticed this was true on every right triangle, okay? So he came up with this theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared, okay? If we add the squares of the sides, the legs of the right triangle, okay, we square the leg, we add it. It's going to be equal to the hypotenuse squared, okay? Let's look at my example. 3 squared, a squared, 3 squared plus 4 squared is equal to 5 squared, okay? But remember, this last number in our formula always has to be the side that's the hypotenuse, no matter what it's labeled, no matter what letter it's given. The side that the sums are equal to has to be the hypotenuse side, okay? Okay, so let's look at some examples. Make sure you've got your notebook. So my first example here, on this right triangle, this bottom leg measures 6, this side leg measures 8 centimeters, and I don't have a length for the hypotenuse. Okay, I just labeled it C. Okay, so my direction says to draw squares off of each side. So in your notes, go ahead and draw this triangle. Give yourself room around the outside to draw your squares. Remember, if this side measures 6, then the square off of it needs to be equal to this side, right? All the sides need to be equal. And the square you draw off the 8 centimeter side, all those need to measure this length, okay? And the square you draw off of here needs to be, all the side lengths need to be this long, okay? So that's your first instruction. And then I said to find the area of each of the squares, okay? So go ahead and do that part. You work while I work. Okay, so I've drawn my squares. Now I need to find the area of each. So this one, my square is an 8 centimeter square. 8 times 8, that gives me 64 square centimeters for this area. 6 by 6 gives me 36 square centimeters for this area. Now this one I don't know the length, right? But I know that if this side measures C, if I square it, I'll get the area, right? So I'm going to say this is C squared. Okay? Now it says to find C. So we need to use that Pythagorean theorem we just talked about. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Mrs. Dern, is it important to memorize this formula? Absolutely. Okay? From now on in your math career, you're going to be using the Pythagorean theorem. Okay? A squared, remember A, your first two numbers that you add together all have to be the legs. Okay? So I'm going to use a leg for A, leg for B. A squared and B squared, I already squared them because I got the areas, right? So 36 plus 64 is equal to C squared. Okay, 36 and 64 add to 100, and this is centimeters, right? Equals C squared. Okay, so I know what C squared is, but I want to know what C is. Okay, what times itself will give me 100? Well, it's going to be 10, right? So C is equal to 10 centimeters. So this side, the hypotenuse of this triangle, measures 10 centimeters. Okay? Here's another example I want you to try. On this right triangle, I know one leg. I know the hypotenuse. We got to figure out the other leg. So think about how you need to set up your formula, what you need to replace in here in order to figure out our missing leg. Go ahead and pause the video and try it. Okay, so I know the hypotenuse, so I know my last number part, right? Oops, that's the 7. 17 squared. I don't know this leg, but I know this leg. So I'm going to say A squared plus 15 squared is equal to 17 squared. Okay, so 17 times 17, 7 times 7 is 49, 7 times 1, 11, 7, 1, 9, 8, 289 for 17 squared. 15 squared I already know is 225. So I have A squared plus 225 is equal to 289. To get A squared by itself, I got to subtract 225 on both sides. That leaves me with 64. So A squared is equal to 64. So what times itself will give me 64? 8. So A is equal to 8. Okay? Okay. So what I want you to do is A, B, C, D in your practice set. Okay? Pause your video. Do A, B, C, D. Okay? It says on there to draw the squares off the sides, but I'm more interested in you using the Pythagorean theorem to figure out your answers. Okay? So go ahead and do A through D on your practice set. Pause your video and then start it back up. Okay, so on A, we're given this triangle. Okay, we're missing a leg. So I use 26 for the hypotenuse. 26 squared is equal to A squared plus 24 squared. Okay, and then I did my squaring here. A squared plus 576 is equal to 676. Subtracted 576 on both sides. A squared is equal to 100. So in this triangle, A has to be 10. Okay? B, I'm missing the hypotenuse. Okay? So I did this leg squared plus this leg squared is equal to the hypotenuse squared. 9 squared is 81. 144 is 12 squared. That gives me 225 equal to B squared. I know that 15 times 15 will give me 225. So B has to be 15. Okay? C, I'm missing the hypotenuse. Even though they've turned this one weird, we can see the side that's missing is opposite the right angle. The side opposite the right angle is the hypotenuse side. Okay? So 8 squared plus 6 squared is 64 plus 36 will give me the hypotenuse squared. 100 is equal to C squared. So the hypotenuse is 10, but on this one they ask us for the perimeter. Okay? So once I figure out that this is 10, 10 and 6 and 8 add to 24 feet for the answer. Okay? Letter D. On D, they said which of those options, A, B, or C, could have the measurements of a right triangle. So we have to see which of those lengths, which of those triangles have lengths that fit the Pythagorean theorem. Okay? Make sure you're using the longest side as the hypotenuse side. So I did A, 10 squared plus 10 squared, and if it's true, it'll be equal to 20 squared. Well, 10 squared and 10 squared give me 200. 20 squared is 400, so that does not work. It cannot be A. Okay? B, 9 squared and 12 squared equal to 15 squared. 81 plus 144 is equal to 225. 81 and 144 do make 225, so the answer is B. Okay? B has the dimensions of a right triangle. And then I just went ahead and showed you C. 9 squared plus 4 squared is equal to 10 squared. 9 squared is 81. That should be 16. Okay, that should be 97. 81 plus 16 makes 97. 97 is not equal to 100. So C is not a right triangle. Okay? Okay. So, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. A very important theorem for you guys to know. Okay? Start working on memorizing it. C, and the last number, the C squared part, always has to be the hypotenuse. Okay? Hypotenuse is always the longest side. Hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you next time. Bye.